Are there some things you should do and not do before eating meat? Hi, I'm Dr. Eric Westman, and welcome to my channel where I review and debunk nutritional misinformation online. This video was sent to me, thank you for your recommendations. Stop doing this before you eat meat. And it's a video by Steak and Butter Gal, a YouTube influencer who promotes the carnivore diet. Very interesting, this carnivore diet thing. I was doing research and using a low-carb keto diet in my clinical practice for 10, 15 years. And people started coming to my office at Duke talking about how keto was difficult, or keto, they didn't like eating all of this butter, adding butter to the coffee and things like that. And I didn't know where this came from because in our research we never included those sorts of things. So we're going to hear some things in this video that we never studied in our studies, and maybe that's why the approach that we use doesn't have all of the side effects that some people get with what we call internet keto. Internet keto is that version of the keto diet that's taught on the internet in many different ways, many different forms. You always want to consider the context, the source of the information, why they were using a keto diet. So let's see what Steak and Butter Gal has to say about optimizing meat consumption.
If you clicked on this video, you're probably already eating meat every day. But in today's video, I'm going to share 3 super easy things you can stop doing before you eat meat to get the best possible day-to-day results on your carnivore diet. So stick around to the end to make sure you're not making these common mistakes. Now, let's dive right in. The first thing that I've learned to stop doing before eating my plate of meat is to keep all of that rendered melted fat in my pan or in my oven tray and actually pouring it onto my plate of meat. I see a lot of new carnivores cook up their fatty meat meals and pour all of that liquid fat left over the meat. They eat their entire meal, they feel fine, and about 30 minutes to an hour later, they get hit with a wave of nausea, heartburn, or they have to go run to the toilet because they have loose stools. Also, when you're consuming animal fats in its liquid form, it can be very easy to overdo it without actually realizing it. Your digestive system responds by increasing bile and enzymes to break it down, which can trigger a pretty immediate feeling of nausea and even diarrhea. A lot of carnivores have issues with loose stools and indigestion, and when I bring up this tip, it usually fixes it really quickly.
Well, that's interesting because in the approach that I use, which allows for some vegetables and leafy greens, just about every stomach issue goes away. Nausea goes away. Heartburn goes away. Irritable bowel syndrome, the diarrhea predominant, goes away. And so if someone is turning to our method that we teach, which is really under 20 total carbs per day, it's carnivore-ish, but it allows some leafy greens and some vegetables. The heartburn and nausea is a sign that something else is going on. It's not just something's being done that's not just the food recommendation that we have. So if someone is taught by me or my team and they have GI upset, even out an hour afterwards, I'll ask, are you adding oils? Are you adding butter on your food? Are you taking a medicine called metformin? Metformin often causes nausea and loose stools, even if you've been on it for a while, because it's a medicine for pre-diabetes and for diabetes, and the side effects become apparent, become active after you change the diet. So don't add excessive oils and butters, and be careful of medications that can cause nausea. I even had it to the extreme degree in my practice where someone went to a GI doctor, a patient of mine went to a GI doctor, and they didn't ask her really what she was eating or the medicine she was taking. She got scoped from the upper endoscopy, it's called, and got scoped from below, the colonoscopy, it's called. They said, well, we can't find the cause of your nausea. And with just a simple history that I took, I figured out it was the metformin. So even if you're on a medicine that you've been on it a while and it hasn't caused side effects, if you change the diet, it can cause side effects where you haven't had it before. And don't add oils and butters on the steak. If you're trying to lose fat off your body, I don't want you adding fat to your meat, which is, I guess, a common carnivore teaching. But if you're trying to burn fat off your body, don't add excessive fats, or let the fat come with the food that you eat, or in the pan as you do your eggs, but don't add excessive amounts because it can cause stomach issues. And in the way I teach it, the stomach issues are gone.
Even though you can probably optimize your carnivore meals by avoiding rendered fat, that doesn't necessarily mean that you should be wasting it either. So I do recommend pouring all of that liquid, amazing fat into a spare glass mason jar or a bowl. Let it cool down in your fridge and just use it as your go-to cooking oil. If you're confused by what I mean when it comes to rendered melted fat, it's basically the liquid fat that oozes out of your fatty meat when you cook it. So here is what came out of my ground beef patties when I cooked it. What I usually do is I save this fat, pour it into a glass dish like this, and the fat actually turns white and solid when you put it in the fridge. This is my favorite way to use beef fat and all the rendered fat that collects. I'll just cut out chunks like this and use it as a cooking oil whenever I fry up my eggs, and sometimes I even just eat it as a solid fat snack. In my experience, I've consistently been able to digest fat much easier when it's in its solid form as opposed to its liquid form. And I suspect this is because when the animal fat is in its liquid form, it just passes through our GI tract too quickly to be properly digested. This is why I intentionally eat my butter and cooked ground beef cold, so it's easier to digest as a high-fat carnivore. For most people, especially those with sensitive digestion, or if you are a new carnivore, I do recommend having cold animal fats like butter or solid chilled tallow instead of the rendered fat if you prioritize having a high-fat carnivore way of eating. This is actually what I do to this day. It's why I love my cold sticks of butter as my fat side to all of my carnivore meals. If you're completely fat adapted and you have no issues with tolerating melted, rendered, cooked fats, it doesn't give you digestion issues or nausea or diarrhea, then by all means go ahead and enjoy it if you love pouring it on your meats.
Well, so that's interesting. So again, I was studying this diet, publishing papers. The method that I use was actually created and promoted and used, popularized by Dr. Atkins, Dr. Eads. These doctors really push protein and then the fats that come along with it. Keto, the internet keto, has this interesting twist, meaning the idea that you want certain elements of the macros in the diet to be mostly fat and then protein, and you really don't have to have carbs, which I think is fine, but there's a range of fat in the diet that can be healthy. And if you're trying to lose weight, you don't want the fat that you burn to come from the fat in your diet. So what I teach to reverse diabetes, or if you're trying to lose weight, is a method that does not ask you to add in fats. In fact, if you look at the macros aren't complete until you add in the fat that your body is utilizing, its battery pack, if you will, or its stored energy. So you're going to get 10% or 15% of your energy from your body fat store. And when you're calculating your macro with your app, which I don't really recommend, but a lot of people are using that, it's not going to come out right because you're not talking about the fat that's coming off your body. Now, the keto diet for epilepsy or for other metabolic issue, if you need to have a certain ketone level, I wouldn't just look at the macros that you're eating. I would introduce the measurement of ketones directly. It can be done now with breath, blood, and urine methods. So, but again, that's kind of interesting that the adding of fats is apparently a carnivore thing to do, and even eating the fat as a snack was kind of interesting. I've never done that, and I do remember being at some conferences in the past with other keto people eating keto diets, eating the pat of butter off the table, and I'm not sure that that's necessary. Well, I know it's not necessary. I'm not sure that it's harmful or has any incremental benefit, though.
The second thing that I've learned to stop doing before my carnivore meals is drinking too much water. And not just water, any liquid in general. So if you're drinking tea, coffee, decaf coffee, sparkling water, try not to drink too much of the liquid before you're about to eat your carnivore meals. I learned this pretty quickly in the beginning of my carnivore journey when I made both the mistake of pouring all of my rendered fats onto my meals and combining it with drinking a lot of water before, during, and after my meals. This really contributed to the waves of nausea that I suffered with initially, as well as all of the bathroom trips where I ran to the toilet and ended up having loose stools. Sorry if it's TMI, but when I made these two simple changes where I minimized drinking water before, during, and after meals and avoiding drinking the rendered fat, it made a world of a difference in my overall nausea, loose stools, diarrhea, and digestion in general. Instead, I recommend drinking water moderately 30 to 45 minutes prior to your meals and hydrating properly with electrolytes if needed. Since we're on the topic of staying hydrated, I wanted to share that after going carnivore, I've personally noticed that I'm just not as thirsty in general. And I attribute that to being incredibly high fat. All of the fats that I'm eating is hydrating my cells and my body. Therefore, I just don't need to drink as much water throughout the day. My choice of hydration on the daily is just filtered water, but I wanted to share my love for this Gerolsteiner sparkling water. This is now my favorite dessert to end all of my carnivore meals. All I do is just serve it in a nice glass and enjoy. Since going carnivore, I basically just drink to thirst, but I also understand that if you're new to carnivore, electrolyte imbalance can be common. And when you have electrolyte imbalance, it can contribute to symptoms like fatigue, headache, lower energy in the gym, and muscle cramping. So if you're looking to resolve your electrolyte imbalance, you can simply just salt all of your carnivore meals a little bit more generously.
Well, it's interesting. The water with the meal is something that doesn't get a whole lot of attention. The idea that you would drink while you're eating doesn't make sense in some cultures. And if you think about it, the water will dilute your digestive juices. If you're drinking lots of water to, say, get full so you eat less food, what's happening though is you're diluting out the digestive juice that you have. And so some cultures do not have you have much liquid during the meal at all. And so if you're having any of these stomach issues that she's mentioning, it is a good idea to minimize the amount of liquid you have while you're eating and see if that doesn't help it. Having the extra fat and the oils, again, might cause nausea. And another common thing that happened for a while is people would be adding coconut oil and drinking it, or putting butter in the coffee, drinking it, and it would give them nausea. And I don't recommend any of those things. That's what we call the internet keto, and my method doesn't teach any of that. In fact, what we teach came about and goes way back 150 years before any of these techniques or biohacks, if you will, came about. So yeah, it doesn't make sense to add lots of water during the meal. It will unnecessarily dilute the digestive juices. Another thing she said that didn't quite make sense to me is the idea that having a cold amount of butter or the cold fat is handled differently. You know, remember your stomach is like a boiler, or it's like a pot on the stove. Your stomach's going to bring all of the water that you drink, the oil that you eat up to room temperature, and it's actually going to be rendered into the oil in your stomach. And so that didn't kind of ring true to me. Of course, there are so many different things happening. If you find that something does work for you, I'll just go along with it and say, okay, well, keep going with it unless it really doesn't make sense or it's harmful in any way.
The third thing that I've learned to stop doing before my carnivore meals is measuring out my meals beforehand. A lot of you might be sensitive about making sure you know the exact metrics of just how much or how little meat you're eating. All this does is bring unnecessary time and, for many, hardship and anxiety to your meals. So for me personally, I spent a whole decade of obsessing over counting calories, restricting, portion controlling, measuring and tracking, and making sure that I never went over a set number of calories for each day of eating. And this can be extremely taxing and exhausting. Not only is your mental health going to take a hit, but having all that unnecessary stress in your daily life is also not going to help in your weight loss goals or your healing goals. So I bring this up because if you find yourself leaning towards obsessing over the numbers, obsessing over counting calories, or tracking in general, I encourage you to take a step back and try to tune into your body. What is your body telling you it needs? And it's okay if you're not 100% clear when you do tune in. That's the whole beauty of going on this carnivore diet and being open to learning more about your body. So I personally think it's a better idea to cook a little bit more meat than you think you can eat. That's always going to be better than measuring out your meat, thinking that you only need, let's say, 1 pound of meat, eating it, and you're still hungry. So again, the best approach is to listen to your body and let your natural hunger cues guide you. Remember, the carnivore diet is all about simplicity and returning to our natural eating instincts. By freeing yourself from the rigidity of measuring every meal, you can enjoy your food a lot more and create a more sustainable and enjoyable eating experience.
Yeah, and that is a typical recommendation of any low-carb keto diet, that you don't count calories. You don't have to. The hunger goes away and you eat less automatically. If you're trying to lose weight, the diet becomes a low-calorie diet because you start burning your own body fat from the beginning, so that it becomes a low-calorie diet even though you don't count calories. And so remember, a carnivore diet, from my viewpoint, is a subset of a low-carb ketogenic diet, and a lot of the same issues will apply. You don't have to count macros, you don't have to count calories, because it becomes a appetite suppressant sort of low-calorie diet for most people automatically. In general, I like the information that Steak and Butter Gal gives out, and of course it's rather focused to the context of a carnivore diet, which is not the only way to eat on a low-carb keto sort of methodology. And a lot of the nuance about fat and cold and hot and water and all this, some of it rings true, some of it doesn't quite make sense to me. Your approach, you may need to customize it and tailor it for yourself. And I'm seeing more and more people who are following a carnivore diet in my office, in my clinic, and the story they tell me in different themes, different variations on the theme, is that the vegetables, the other sort of products or foods gave them reactions. And even the idea that that electrolyte supplement has some ingredients in it, the stevia, for example. Someone brought back all of the packs of the element because she couldn't tolerate it, so that when Steak and Butter Gal talks about element, she talks about the one that has no additives in it. Another way to get that is through a bouillon cube or milk and magnesia, and or just the salt in the shaker as well. So in general, remember, you don't have to start out doing a carnivore diet. And remember, if you've had weight loss surgery of any kind, you have to be careful about nutrition and nutritional absorption, no matter what kind of diet that you follow, and would really benefit from some sort of bariatric surgery vitamin if you've had weight loss surgery. I hope that's helpful. If you like, please like, subscribe, ring the notification bell, and I'm putting new information out on Wednesdays and Fridays. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell, and check out adaptyourlifeacademy.com.